Sunday morning, Candy Creek Church. For those of you that don't know who I am Pastor Brandon. I'm the pastor of the church. It's great that you decided to honor your mom by being here with us today. It means a lot to us, and we hope that today's service is special. We are beginning a new series this morning titled, What's Love Got to Do with It? We are going to endeavor to answer this immortal question that was asked by Tina Turner. What's love got to do with it? And over the next 3 weeks, we are going to look at 1 Corinthians 13. It's one of the most famous chapters in the Bible. Odds are at some point in the last 3 months, or next 3 months, you'll be at a wedding where this chapter will be read. It is affectionately referred to as the love chapter. So we are going to talk about love over the next several weeks. And many scholars have broken down this one particular chapter. In fact, one scholar said that it's like dissecting a flower. That if you tear it apart too much, 1 Corinthians 13 will lose its beauty. Another scholar said that one could get a spiritual suntan from the warmth of this chapter. But over these 3 weeks, what we are hoping to do is to break it down and to answer the question, what's love got to do with it? But to break it down not too much because we want it to maintain its beauty. So if you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Odds are, if you're here with your woman, she knows exactly where this chapter is. And so I'm going to read 3 verses, and then we're going to pray. It says, "And yet I will show you the most excellent way, that if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. And if I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing." What's love got to do with it? I want everybody to bow your heads, close your eyes. I want you to repeat this prayer after me. Everyone say, "Dear Jesus, speak to my heart. Change my life. In Jesus' name, amen." Well, the book of Corinthians was written by the Apostle Paul. And Paul wrote 1st and 2nd Corinthians specifically to address some issues that the Christians in Corinth were dealing with. In fact, years and years ago, Mars Hill did a series on 1 Corinthians that was really well done. And they titled it, "Christians Gone Wild." And really, that's what had happened in Corinth, is that these Christians had gotten so into their spirituality and so hyper-spiritual that they had forgotten the basis of their entire faith. And Paul wrote 1st and 2nd Corinthians to deal with these issues that they were struggling with. And his hope was to bring the Christians in Corinth back into balance. You see, in particular, the Corinthian Christians were so enamored with spiritual gifts that they had wrongly began measuring their own significance based upon the gifts that they possessed. And so Paul, in particular, addressed this issue in 1 Corinthians 13, and he wanted the Christians in Corinth to understand that they were at the very heart missing the purpose of spiritual gifts, that they were missing the motive and the goal of these gifts, that they had gotten to the point where Their view of gifts had become so self-centered that they had missed the entire point. And what he wanted them to understand very clearly is that the possession of spiritual gifts was not a sign of spirituality at all. That you can't, just because God has given you a gift, that you don't carry it around as a trophy or have a medal around your neck that you show off and wave around. He wanted to say that that is not a sign of spirituality at all, but in fact, love is. And that it wasn't an issue of someone has gifts over here and someone has love over here. It wasn't an issue of either or, but the focus and goal of any gift that God might have deemed you worthy of receiving, that the focus of it must be love. That it is never gifts for gifts' sake, but they have to be done in accordance with a heart that's motivated by love. Now, as we dive into this particular chapter, I want you to understand that in the New Testament, which we know was written originally in Greek, that the Greeks used 4 different words that were translated as love. So whenever you read the word love in the New Testament, it could mean actually one of these different words. It could have one of these different meanings. But the 4 words, the first one is eros, and the words are popping behind me. So the first one's eros, and eros love is sexual love. That is not the type of love that Paul was talking about in 1 Corinthians 13. Sorry, dudes, it wasn't. Another type of love is storge love. And this is family love. This is the way that a mother loves her children, or a father loves his kids, or the way that a brother and sister love each other, things like that. I think it's very evidenced by what I experienced yesterday. My baby girl, junior in high school, went to prom. And showing how much storge love I have for her, I threatened her prom date, this dude. That's Jonathan. You need to feel bad for him, especially because there's a big church in Snohomish County that's talking about him. He's going to be mortified when he finds out. But the highlight of my interrogation of this kid was I had tweeted that, hey, if there's any dads, you have any guns, you want to swing over by my house, and I gave a time and said I'm going to meet this kid that's going to take my daughter out to prom. And only one person showed up. Our junior high director, Tony Matar. It was so classic. Okay, I'm sitting down, and this kid, surprisingly, ends up being a really nice kid. I mean, he's just a sweet guy, and I was feeling all comfortable, and all of a sudden, I hear a knock on the door, and my dogs start barking. I went, who's here? And it was Tony. I went, Tony, what are you doing here? And Tony, this is all he says. He goes, is the guy here? I went, the guy? Yeah, is the guy here? And I said, oh, Rachel's date, yes. And so he shuts the door, he walks in, and he sits down, and he goes, hey, what's your name? Doesn't say anything to anyone else in the house. What's your name? What grade are you? When's your birthday? What's your GPA? What's your SAT score? And he starts, I'm not kidding. I mean, so the kid's like, Jonathan, my birthday was yesterday. I got a 1900 on the SAT. I have a 3.9 GPA. And Tony asked him a bunch of other questions. And then Tony looks at me, and he goes, all right, I give my approval, when he walks out. So every dad who has a daughter understands storge love. So you can also be praying for that kid, because he's probably never going to recover. But another type of love that Paul refers to is philo love, which is brotherly love, like that you have between friends. I mean, someone that you deeply care about, but they're not family, and you're not in a marriage relationship with them, but you love them. It's different. And then finally, the Greeks use the word agape to translate love. And agape love is unconditional love. And that is actually the type of love that Paul is referring to in 1 Corinthians 13. Paul was referring to unconditional love. And let me define it by saying that agape love is love that never changes. It is self-giving love. Agape love is love that is given even to those that are unlovable, even to those that are unappealing. Unconditional agape love is love that is given even when it's rejected. Agape love gives love because it loves, not in order to receive love back. Agape love is love that doesn't ever expect repayment. It gives love just because it wants to. In fact, agape love is love that has very little to do with emotion, but it has everything to do with self-denial. So in 1 Corinthians 13, when Paul addresses love, you need to understand the type of love that he is talking about. He is talking about this unconditional love that is full of self-denial, that is not attached to any expectations that love will be reciprocated, but that it is this love without changing, this unconditional type of love. And Paul decides to talk about the things that the Corinthian Christians love the most, which is these spiritual gifts. And he uses these gifts that Corinthians prized and held as a badge of honor. And to describe the importance of love, Paul takes these spiritual gifts and he takes them all the way to their ultimate measure. And he compares, he says, if you use this gift at its ultimate, and then he compares it to love. So in 1 Corinthians 13:1, he says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. You see, tongues was this gift that the Corinthian Christians carried as a badge of honor, that it was a reflection of their spirituality. And so Paul takes the spiritual gift of tongues and he takes it to the ultimate level. And he said, if you are a person and you are given the supernatural ability to speak every human language, and then he even takes it beyond every human language, and he says, and not only that, but you can speak a heavenly language. So he takes it to its fullest extent, and he said, you can practice this gift. But if you do not have agape, unconditional, self-denying love, he says, it is nothing. Without love, that gift is completely not profitable to any man. In fact, Paul says it's the equivalent of you just banging a gong over and over again, or you just clanging cymbals over and over again. And a gong or a cymbal can be beautiful if it is a piece of music that's accompanied by a bunch of different instruments. But a gong or a cymbal are instruments that were not meant to be alone. You know, they're just irritating noise by themselves. If I was to, why not? How do I get in here? Can you hear me? So is there a drum? There's drumsticks. If all I did I did that for less than a minute and it was annoying. Should I keep doing it? Is that annoying? That was totally spontaneous. I don't know. Hopefully you find the drumsticks and I didn't break them. I think I cracked them, though. But Paul's point is, by itself, that is just irritating. It's not enjoyable. And he says, if you speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but don't have love, it's nothing. In fact, Paul is trying to emphasize that any gift exercised primarily for the benefit of the one gifted, it cheapens the gift. The end result is not edification, but it's exasperation. And he goes on and he says, and if I have the gift of prophecy, and the gift of prophecy is the ability to receive knowledge from divine revelation from God. And prophecy at its ultimate would be someone who has all knowledge and can understand every mystery. And he says, if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, if you are someone who has the gift of faith, that you believe God for the impossible, and it happens. And Paul was quoting in particular Jesus when he said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there. It will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. But the gift of faith at its ultimate isn't just the ability to move a mountain from here to there. It would be the ability to completely remove a mountain. And then Paul says, if you have the gift of prophecy or the gift of faith, but do not have love, he says, I am nothing. That without love attached to this gift, it makes you nothing. I mean, you can walk around carrying your little prophet badge. You can walk around with your faith that says, I can walk on water. But if love is not at the heart of it, you are nothing. Paul's saying if you possess the greatest of all their gifts and you exercise those gifts to their fullest extent, but you as a person lack love, you are nothing. You are a nobody. You have missed the point of this life. And then finally he goes on, so he's talking about spiritual gifts here, and then he talks about sacrifice next. And he says, if I give all I possess to the poor, and I give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. And Paul is trying to say that you can give of the ultimate personal sacrifice. You can give up all of your possessions. You can even give up your entire life. But Paul says without love being the motivation behind it, it means nothing. And as I was studying this, I was thinking, people wrongly assume that great sacrifice equals great love. We think that, okay, as long as I do the right thing, as long as I give away everything I own, as long as I'm willing to, go on that short-term missions trip and deny myself, as long as I'm willing to do some sort of great sacrifice, that means that I am a lover. But Paul is trying to remind us that sacrifice can also be very self-serving. That giving is not the best measure of spirituality, and you've probably heard that from many people, that the best measure of someone's spirituality is their level of self-sacrifice, their level of personal self-denial, their level of personal martyrdom, whatever it may be. And Paul is saying that that is not a measure of spirituality at all. The true measure of spirituality is love. That giving should always be a byproduct of unconditional love. He's reminding us that everything rises and falls on love. That the fruit of the Spirit, love, supersedes all other fruits of the Spirit and supersedes all other spiritual gifts. In fact, Paul went on in the book of Romans 13:9. He said, you know the commandments. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not murder. You shall not steal. You shall not covet. And whatever other commandment there may be are summed up in one command. So he's trying to say this. You can be like an A+ and do all the right things or not do all the wrong things. But he says, it's summed up in this command. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. So Paul is trying to emphasize again, you can, live a very pious, self-righteous life. But if you do not have love, you've missed the point. One of my favorite verses, in fact, it's a verse that I memorized at the beginning of this year, and it's one of those verses that I'm trying to apply to my personal life over and over again. In fact, I quote this verse throughout the day, and I remind myself the importance. It's 1 Timothy 1:5. And Paul is telling a young Timothy, he said, the goal of this command is love. And I like it because then he defines where love comes from. He said it comes from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. So every day I get up and I quote that verse and I say, all right, Lord, you've called me to be a lover. And that means I need to have a pure heart. It means I need to be able to go to bed at night with a good conscience. And that means I need to walk through my day with a sincere faith. You see, church, everything that Paul described in 1 Corinthians 13, none of those things are bad. In fact, they're all good. Tongues are good. Prophecy is good. Knowledge is good. Faith is good. Sacrifice is good. But Paul is reminding us that love itself is so valuable, that it is so important, that without it, every other gift is useless. So, to answer Tina Turner's question, what's love got to do with it? In the words of Paul, everything. Absolutely everything. As I was studying for the message this week, I thought, it's so easy to talk about love on Mother's Day. And talk in particular about the type of love that Paul was describing in 1 Corinthians 13, this unconditional, this self-denying, this love that is given without expectation of reciprocation, because I think our church is full of moms that exemplify this type of love. And I told Christian, I was actually on an airplane as I was writing this. I was at a consulting gig at a church in Chicago, and so I was flying there for this one-day thing, and I was studying my message on the airplane, and I told Christian that I had this spiritual encounter with Jesus on an airplane, 20,000 feet in the air, as I started thinking about the moms that I've had the privilege of interacting with at our church. And, you know, our nursery is always full of babies, and our toddler area is always full of 1- and 2-year-olds running around, and our kids' church area at all 3 of our services is always packed with kids that are loved and moms that have exemplified absolute self-sacrifice. I was thinking about, you know, the moms in my life, or the moms that I've encountered at our church. You know, they give so much, and they're so gifted that they are chefs and chauffeurs and coaches and party planners and accountants and doctors, and they are all of the above without any expectation that love will be returned. They do it just because they love. And I want to say, as the pastor of this church, man, I consider it a privilege to lead such amazing moms in this church. You know, I thought in particular, I think it's almost like we have a church full of super moms. When I think about all the different things that the moms in our church do, but most of all, their incredible level of sacrifice. So I want to just say, as pastor of the church, to all the moms that are here, we are proud to know you. Thank you for your level of love and your level of sacrifice. Thank you for being a mom. And thank you for being such an extraordinary example to those younger than you. So on that note, here's what I want to do. I want to have all the moms in our church. I want you to stand up. Stand up on your feet. Come on, we want to honor you. And all of the kids have a special token of thank you. So they're going to run in. But you're not allowed to sit down, Mom, until one of the kids gives you something. So kids, I want you to run over to this side. Don't forget, like, you know, this group over here.
Really hustling.
This is always the awkward pause. Any woman that is standing up is a mom, waiting for candy. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Christian, and I'm going to go drive to Glacier Peak.
All right, kiddos, hustle. What I love about this every time of the year is that if you ask a kid to sit still,